I am Ayok Patrick, and I am the director for the Samsoya Center for Democracy and Human Rights, and I am the facilitator for the first meeting of the Samsoya Center for Human Rights, which will be looking at issues related to human rights abuses that have been taking place in southern Cameroon, orchestrated by the government of Cameroon. So the Samsoya Center for Human Rights is an initiative that tries to create awareness, protect and defend and take care of people that have gone through a lot of human rights abuses in southern Cameroon. And it's also meant to commemorate not only Samsoya. Samsoya was brutally beheaded in front of cameras by the soldiers of Cameroon to send a strong warning and a message, and therefore oppress people or intimidate people that are fighting for their rights of expression, the rights for freedom, and the right to self-determination. So we will be, so that's exactly what the Samsoya Center for Human Rights will be doing. And Samsoya happens to be a point of contact, a connection. This shop owner who was brutally murdered, beheaded in front of cameras, as a point to prove to our people that nobody speaks about anything in that society. Otherwise, we'll go through the same problem. Becomes a point of contact of our people that have been abducted and in jail. It becomes a point of contact also for people that are in difficult circumstances, that are in prisons, like we have programs like the Prisoners of Conscience. It's also a point of creating awareness for all men and women that were burned in their houses while in sleep. It is also a point that shows to the world how people have been shot, how we have more than 160,000 internally displaced people living in bushes. It also tries to show to the world, as Samsoya Center for Human Rights, it is a point that disseminates to the world how there are more than 40,000 or 60,000 Southern Cameroon's refugees in Nigeria. Southern Cameroon from 1961, which had its independence with the United Nations vote of 64%, was occupied by French Cameroon. So it's actually portraying that the root causes of why we are having a lot of dehumanization today is occupation, forceful occupation or colonialism. So it is through this colonialism or forceful occupation of a sovereign territory like Southern Cameroon that remote causes came about. So what we are seeing today is a spillover effect of the root causes, and the root cause is colonization. And as the people try to decolonize themselves to fight against these root causes, we now see a spillover effect or remote causes like talking about culture, talking about language. So what we're seeing today is about cultural genocide, cultural assassination as a result of colonization, trying to change the people from their own way of thinking, from their own culture, from their own system of education, from their own way that they see themselves as Southern Cameroons to French people or French Cameroon. Try to assimilate the people by changing their education system, because those are some of the institutions that came in place, the apparatus that help people to be fully, that makes people to be fully colonized. So the root cause of our problem today is colonization, forceful occupation. And it's because of this colonization that we are having spillover effects, and you can call it remote causes, like dehumanization, lack of freedom of speech. Before the French occupation, Southern Cameroon as a sovereign state was having its own livelihood security. There were industries that were existing, our people were employed. After colonization, these industries were wiped out in the form of primitive accumulation. And therefore, our people had to move from people that are supposed to contribute in the process of production, in the means of production, to simple beggar. They had no choice. So those are the remote causes of this problem. We could also see that because of colonization, there is also a lack of identity, lack of self-esteem for the Southern Cameroon's people. And therefore, the people are fighting to restore their identity, to restore their sovereignty, to restore the rights that they used to enjoy before they were occupied by French Cameroon. So thank you so much. On that note, I would like to Professor Patrice Ngana to come on stage and speak on the lack of freedom of expression, association, and assembly in Southern Cameroons. Thank you so much, Professor.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. And as you may imagine, it's a greatest honor for me to be here, and I'm really happy to be part of this meeting. My name is Patrice Ngana, and I said before that I am a writer. Otherwise, my profession is, that's with which I pay my bills. I'm a professor in the US, but I've published a substantial amount of books, some of which are translated into English. And so if you type on Amazon, etc., you easily have them. Now, the thing is that I am a Francophone, and you may have heard, for those of you who are not familiar with the distinction in Cameroon, and I call them new ethnicities. One will maybe have to struggle with the term ethnicity because on the African landscape, ethnicity is something that we cherish. I'm happy, I'm strong, and a very proud Bangante, and don't joke with that, and to never mess with the Bangante anyway. But at the same time, we don't like to talk about it because we understand that it is a political lightning rod. So those two variants are essentially in our own constitution as Africans, I think, as black people also in general. But as far as Cameroon is concerned, I think we may have to deal with the fact that there are new ethnicities that have been constituted throughout our history. And just to soothe our understanding of it from an American standpoint, I tend to say that it will be very difficult to understand the composition of the US of America without the Latinos, for instance, and yet the Latinos are a new ethnicity based on language, Spanish. And if you come to South Africa, you won't understand what it is, but in the US it will have its significance. The same will apply to Cameroon, and therefore, when I say that I'm a Francophone, understand it that way. And I hope you also understand that we are dealing here with not only a political battle, a state, judicial, etc., in all its ramifications, but also with a social battle when we talk about populations. That's what's happening. And in these pictures that you saw, you could see the shift between a legal argument between, with lawyer Bobga, with whom, is my friend. He lives in the US now. He's in exile. A shift from Harmony Bobga to Mancho Bibisi, with whom I was in jail, and that was the social battle now on the street. So I'm trying to say that when I present myself as a Francophone, it is indeed to highlight some of the things that are happening in Cameroon. So I'm a Francophone writer, and in that capacity, I'm very happy to be here. What I'm going to be talking about is somehow the combination of the relationship between those two entities that became states or are produced by the states that we have. And I'm going, as a writer does, I'm going to use two metaphors, and please remember them. The first one being the metaphor of a train. So when you have a train, the train has many, how do you call it in English? Cars? Cabins. Yes, cabins, exactly. And in a cabin, in general, you have 6 people sitting. So when those six people are already seated, the cabin is full. So somebody will have to go somewhere else if a new person comes. But sometimes only 5 persons are in the cabin, right? So there's one seat that is left. And so the people who are there, the 5 people, sometimes it's even 4. So they are quite happy, they're stretching, they stretch their legs, they put their bags here and there. They are relaxing and they have a long trip, and so they are quite happy. And along the way, you have one fellow who comes, it's the 5th one, or the 6th one, and he comes with his things, he has luggages, and he wants to put them up. And those 5 or 4 people, and of course, they pay the same fare, right? They don't own the train. It is not their train. But somehow in that cabin, they feel that it's theirs. They feel that it is their place. And they are quite grumpy. Say, yeah, come on, push here, what's happening, etc. So they built a certain community of rejection of the new person who just entered in the cabin. And one needs sometimes even 1 hour or so before the conversation includes the person who just entered. And guess what? When they were the 5th of them in the cabin, they had a conversation going on, sometimes even for 1 hour or 2. And the new person needs time to join that conversation too. Please remember that metaphor, because it seems to me very often that it is what happens in a long history or in a short history of Cameroon. You have some dates that were given to you, but if you have the metaphor, you understand somehow the dynamic of what is going on and the violence that such a dynamic creates. I'm going now to break it down a little bit and repeat some of the dates that you would hear many times today. The first one, of course, being that, like most African countries, Cameroon in general was not invented by us. It was invented by the white man. I can say it blank, full. Even the name is a joke. It is so so funny. It is so funnily insulting, the name Cameroon, that even me, I will not call anybody like that, because it means shrimp. You see, somebody is laughing already. It means shrimp. That's it. So what kind of a country can be named like that? Something that you eat. It's simply ridiculous. The Portuguese named it Cameroon. The Germans kept the name, and he went on and on in all the transformations. Even the battles, the political battles that one had, the most intelligent Cameroonians never came to the idea of changing that name to give a more dignified name to the place that we inhabit. But it is not a name that was given by Cameroonians to that place. Even the map that one is talking about wasn't drawn by us. And I was happy that you had a map of German Cameroon there, a very large one that included a space even larger than the one that is contentious now, because the map of Cameroon changed quite often. I've published 3 novels, it's lengthy ones, 500 pages each, and I'm actually reading the last one that's going to be published in August, where in all of those novels, the first page is a map of Cameroon. The first map of 1884, and then the map of 1921, and then now the map of 1960 and 1961, for people to see how the map changed all the time. And in all those processes, you see, it is not the Cameroonians themselves that changed the map. The fact is that Germany, having invented, having created, having mapped out Cameroon, and the first geographer who mapped out Cameroon, Moselle, is quite a very important German scholarship, who drew the first map, made it totally clear that it is not what we have today. But the fact is that Germany lost the war in 1916. That is a fact. And so the consequence is dramatic. And to phrase it differently, I think from the South Africa point of view, one can relate it to what happened to Namibia, which is that after Germany lost the war, that part that was the colony of Germany went to the people who defeated Germany, the Allies, and France was on the east side, England was on the west side. So they met at the center there, and they kind of shared that space called Cameroon. And I think Namibia was also ruled that way by South Africa, was it not? So, and after a certain point, after the war, And after so when Namibia got its independence from South Africa, the same happened to Cameroon, which means after 1916, Cameroon was not a colony any longer, but was a trustee of the League of Nations, and then of the United Nations. So that is how Cameroon's destiny was phrased. But you can even go through the history of both the Francophone and the Anglophone Cameroons. You will see that none of those Cameroonian politicians came to the idea of really going to London or to Paris to claim independence, because it didn't make any sense to none of them. They went to the UN. They went to the UN to say that Cameroon is not well treated by the people to whom he was trusted. And so they didn't go to France to say, we want to be free, because France wasn't a colonizer for Cameroon. And you can run through the history of Cameroon, you will see that. Right? So in 1960 and in 1961, for the English-speaking part, you had, the formal independence, moving out of the trusteeship. And those small steps are, I think, significant because they are the legal framework into which one walked in. Now, the first level is that the French-speaking part of Cameroon walked into independence, calling itself La République du Cameroun. The consequence is what? It is that it possessed the name Cameroon. It took the name La République du Cameroun for itself. That's what I call the precedent, the antecedent, if you want. The four people in the cabin, it took the name. And the English-speaking part came later in 1961 to join that cabin. And I'm saying it is the one or two people who join in the group of 6, because of course it is a minority. So it joined into that cabin. It has large consequences, fundamental consequences, because it had to join a group of people that already had a history of dealing with each other. It joined a group of people that had a particular manner of relating to each other. It joined a system that was organized in a particular way. It joined, etc., etc. So a school system, a judicial system, etc., etc. All those things. It joined a battle between people that was totally bloody, but we'll come back to to it step by step. One of the things that in that long history of joining, the Francophone part of Cameroon, one of the things that happened, I think, and that are worth mentioning, is that the French-speaking part of Cameroon actually politically has not changed that much. And so the power that, or the political structure that was installed in 1940 really, is the one that one is having until today. It means the English-speaking part joined in 1961 a country that had a continuity in its administration, in its political structure, in its personnel, that was pretty settled. And until today, I think we are in 2018, it hasn't changed. So if you take the way, for instance, social organization, I'm going to maybe mention something that's closer to us. When all of you presented yourselves, you said, I'm an activist. And it seems to me this is a positive term, isn't it? Now, in Cameroon, it's a totally negative term. So if I get up like this, I say, je suis un activiste, I'm an activist. So you must be kidding, my friend. An activist? It's like a joke. You know, when people want to trash me on TV, they will say, this guy is just an activist. That is the way. So for you to understand it, you really have to come back to 1940 to understand that the political structure, the political machine that was set in place has not changed. So in other words, it has mapped out the constitution of the Cameroonian policy in a particular way. I'm going to jump a little bit and come to 1984, where one had a slight, I would say, a palace revolution. Because the fundamental thing in Cameroon is, of course, that from 1960 to 2018, one has had only 2 presidents. One has had only 1 ruling party all along. One has had no change, really, 0 So it means one can talk about, one can mention, I can really say that the train, the cabin that I'm talking about is the same from 1940 until today. So you have zero change. One can see that Cameroon is a museum of colonialism. You can walk into it and you have the dresses, you have the clothes, you have everything that will have you fall back to 1940 easily. Right? So in 1984, you had a slight change. Now the slight change that was made became quite fundamental because the new president who came into power through a palace revolution in that cabinet that hasn't changed, right? This small palace revolution made 3 decisions that are quite important. From 1960 until 1984, there was when the English-speaking part of Cameroon had joined already, there was some sense of accommodation of having the English-speaking part join the conversation, having those two tails touch each other again. The new president took the first decision, which is to change the name of Cameroon back to what it was during the independence of the French-speaking part. So Cameroon became again what it was when it was only ruled, independent as one single French-speaking country, La République du Cameroun. That's essential. It means it erased the total presence of the English-speaking part. The second decision he took is that he fundamentally changed the structure of government. And one will have to understand that he is a very paranoid individual. And he took power from somebody who I would say was even more paranoid than him. So he changed the structure of administration. Before there was a VP. The VP was English speaking. It was Muna, Tane Muna. Right? And the slot, the presidential campaign, it was a crooked campaign, one party, etc. But the VP was English speaking. So it was a part of a deal, of an agreement that set the position of English speaking Cameroonians at the highest level of power, and also it went down until the bottom. Now the new president came, and with this paranoia, first of all, that position of VP was already raised. So what he did, he was prime minister before coming there, he emptied all the subsequent positions of any significance they had. And today, the highest ranking English-speaking Cameroonian is VP, but the VP is really nothing. He's a secretary, he's somebody who's typing. I would even say it's a typing machine, because he doesn't compose his own government. He doesn't. His ministers are sometimes arrested in front of him, put in jail, and the next day they come back to his office, to their office. And in front of him, he can't do anything. No country has something like that, where a minister will go to jail, and the next day come back to office. And the prime minister doesn't know, he's simply there. So the emptying of the position of English speaking had as a consequence the loss of their power. And I'm talking about 1984 here, 1985. And you can see that in 1990, until we get to the position of the most important political party of the opposition in Cameroon, being English-speaking, John Frundi being its leader, being an English speaker, so the challenger of power in Cameroon coming from the English-speaking part, we understand that we have a long way until today. Right? To have a country where the ruling party has at its opposition an English-speaking, a party that's really installed fundamentally in the English-speaking part of the country, there is something that happened along the way, right? Politically, in the organization of the country. These are the two decisions I will mention. The third one is now the reorganization of the structure of the state. So Cameroon is now split in regions. So before, all of us are old enough, those of us who come from that country are old enough to know that those regions were provinces before. But now in 1983, you had a change in that organization which transformed the country that we have into, I'll call it in general, a simple copy of France, which if some of you have gone to France, you understand that you can do nothing without Paris. that is where the decision is taken, and that is where you have to go. In Cameroon, a country that's poorer, it is even horrible, because if you have a job and you work, for instance, in the north, in the far north, sometimes to get your salary, you have to go to Yaoundé to get it and go back to work in the north. So it is that drastic. So it means the dependence of all the country on that capital is such that anybody who comes from Cameroon will tell you that nothing can be done if you don't have Yaoundé's agreement. Actually, if you're in the provinces, in the regions, you will simply have to wait. And I have mentioned that that going from 1961, Cameroon was a federation with the English-speaking, but I think somebody is going to mention those kinds of things, because the erasure, the transformation of that state into a Jacobin structure had as its consequence the erasure of the federalist constitution that it had before. So these are the three important things that that I would like us to put on the table and address, or that I would like you to maybe remember when you think of that cabin, of joining having the sixth passenger joining a cabin or joining a conversation. And as you realize, the conversation has swallowed the sixth passenger and had continued along the way, as if that sixth passenger actually had nothing to say, had simply to enter into what was being talked about, had simply to melt into what is going on and to shut up, contribute to what has been going on. Now the thing is the following, and I'm going to now take the second metaphor, which is the metaphor of marriage. And I think most of us here, I think there is no baby. Some of us may be married, or some may not, may have a girlfriend or a partner, etc. But I think we understand that the duty of having a partner is that you meet when you are somehow adults. You have a past already, and so when you're in love, that's the beauty of it. It's that you tend not to ask lots of questions. You tend not to look too much, and the person you want to get married to will not actually tell all the secrets. So there are many things you discover only when you are married already. And guess what? That's what life is. That is what life is. You adapt to it along the way. Sometimes discover, oh my goodness, my husband, I didn't know he's a violent person. I didn't know he can have such outbursts of rage. I didn't know you can be such a, I don't know what it is that, why is that you start drinking? You don't know that when he was a student, all his friends knew that he drank a lot. You should have asked them, but they would not have told you. And you see, that's what I'm talking about. So the bottom line is that any speaking part of Cameroon joined a French-speaking part of Cameroon that was very violent, and they were not told that. They were not told that they are joining a part of Cameroon that had committed genocide, and that is actually in the process of that reunification, literally committing a genocide. So they were not told that. And I'm going to come to those new ethnicities again, simply to underline that from 1940 until 1945, one had the war, certainly, and so it was a quite interesting time, at the end of which you had the birth of a political consciousness in the French-speaking part of Cameroon, where you had a new class of people coming out, the building of unions and, political leaders building their consciousness, and the creation of, in 1948, of political parties, of political organizations, kumze, sometimes tribal organizations with political affiliations, etc., etc. You had a political activity. But of course, it was under the shadow, and very often, frankly, 1948, for instance, against the French administration. It ended up in 1955 with having all those people who had, a political activity simply being expelled from the country. So they had to run for their life or go underground. So you had two movements. May 1955, I would say, for all French-speaking Cameroonians, is a date of horror, because you had a mass protest, and the police came down on people in a way that people haven't forgotten. The leader of that party, the UPC, went underground in his village. He tried to build an underground organization, a military organization, tried to build an army. He was murdered there, betrayed by his closest brother or friend who was a police informant, a policeman before, and killed. His lieutenants ran for their lives and went to English-speaking Cameroon because in 1955, as I did not mention, somebody will certainly, English-speaking Cameroon was run as part of Nigeria. So it was not under the trusteeship of the French, so they had a shelter there. They ran to Kumba, to Bamenda, etc., and finally went to Sudan and into exile. The bottom line is that the French-speaking Cameroon had just killed expelled the very leader who faced for the first time the will for independence. They had just erased any memory of anybody who wanted independence in Cameroon, who built structures for independence, who actually organized for independence, and who even voiced the will to have the English-speaking Cameroonians, sisters and brothers, come back into Cameroon, reunification, who wanted that. They just murdered all of them, sent them into exile. Right? It is fundamental for us to remember that. And also, they had just killed hundreds and thousands of people, which to repeat again in 1960, when some of those leaders in exile will come back to Cameroon to try to revive the will for independence through an underground organization that will create a civil war lasting from 1960 to 1970. They will be murdered, hundreds and thousands, a genocide really, amongst the Bamileke before he was amongst the Bassa, and the second amongst the Bamileke. The leader will be arrested, he's sentenced to death, and he will be killed in 1971. It is essential for us to remember that. But it is essential to remember, therefore, that when the English-speaking leadership came to settled the agreement for reunification, they did not deal with the people who wanted reunification. They did not deal with the people who wanted independence. They dealt with the de facto leaders who actually had campaigned throughout their political career against independence. They joined, they built the agreement for reunification with a leadership that across the globe will simply be seen as puppets. And they are still in power. Because I told you that it is a train that has not changed. They reunited with the people who had just killed the leadership that wanted independence in the first place, and that wanted reunification in the first place. So they shook hands with murderers, in other words. They danced with the devil. They dine with people who are not worthy of any political substance. They actually walk in the trap, if you want. And that is what is happening. That is what is happening. But one of the consequences of that dynamic, that violent dynamic I just mentioned, is that the political class we are talking about had no incentive, first of all, of presenting its past to anybody. Because, of course, that past was bloody. It had no reason to actually teach about what it did because there was no interest in doing that. So you had a quite crooked position there. When you look at those pictures, it is simply ugly. You see people who don't deserve to be there on both sides, really. You see people who are simply ugly. And they will be vanquished so easily if there was a social movement. But yet, any form of social movement is banned, is killed, is murdered, is assassinated, etc. in Cameroon. And that's essential to say. Why is it so? It is so because the French-speaking part of Cameroon wasn't accountable, wasn't taken to task to answer for the crimes it committed between 1955 and 1959 against the Bassa people. Did you know this idea? It didn't answer I didn't give any answer to the killings, to the massacre, to the genocide he did against the Bamileke people between 1960 and 1970. And even when Biya came to power in 1984, he arrested, there was an attempt of a coup d'etat by Northerners. He arrested maybe 300 of them and executed them in his village. He never answered to that. So a power that actually has committed system I've mentioned 3 times, massacres, genocides, is that have committed so much crimes without having to answer to anybody, who has actually kept its position intact since 1940, where you can write a tale of continuity in personnel, a tale of continuity in method, a tale of continuity in tactics, a tale of continuity in institutions. You can easily do that. A power that can do that without being punished can actually apply the same thing to the English-speaking Cameroonians in 2016. In other words, what I'm trying to say is the following. It is that if the Anglophones, if the Southern Cameroonians, if the Ambazonians were not part of the train conversation that has been bloody all along between 1940 and until 1961, actually, they joined the conversation in 2016. Because any thinking Cameroonian would have said, oh, that is how they have treated us all along. You did not know that. That is exactly what they do to you. Guess what? Let us simply take a map, a piece of paper, and write down the burning of villages. So they go systematically, they take this village to burn, that other one they burn. They don't burn everything because then it will be in the New York Times, it is the burning of it. No, they burn 3 neighborhoods. And then they go to the next one, they burn 2. And you don't know which one. They go to the other one, they burn 3. And then they come here, they burn 2 houses. So they do it systematically. And now you come to the number of 74. You wonder, why is it not in newspapers? You say, what's going on here? I mean, the number is amazing. 74 villages are burned. No, it's because they do low-scale crimes. They don't do those high crimes, but it is the multiplication of them that makes the genocide. They don't do like in Rwanda, where they will come and one other days and kill 1 million. No, systematically. They don't arrest at the same time, 100 people. No, they come, they arrest 3, then 4. And then in a month, you have 200 already. They are packed in the camp. You wonder, how did they get there? Why is it not in newspapers? That is the point. It's that you never know. It's never a large number. Right? You have students who are arrested. They are sentenced to, things. It is never, now with English-speaking Cameroonians, it is 11 years, etc., 15 years. But now it's 2 years, 3 years. You go to Amnesty International, you say, I am being oppressed here. You say, why are you oppressed? It is only 1 year. What's happening? And then, yes, and then you're in the room, everybody has gotten 1 year. What's up? So what's going on here? But it is a low radar attack. It is a low radar tactic. Right? That is the French tactic. That is the French tactic. It is that it is never high radar. It is always smooth. It's like a baguette. It is sweet, but it is good. You eat, but it's still bread. That kind of a thing. So the burning of villages, you can cross from 1940 until today. The fact that, for instance, people who are arrested in this particular region are sentenced in another region is essential. It dates from those particular years. You have a continuity of the same. The fact that they are sentenced by a judge who doesn't speak the language that they speak, right? That the judge is, speaks French. It dates back to colonial years, where you have people coming from Chad to do those kinds of things in the French-speaking Cameroon, where you have, the fact that soldiers are in general from the French-speaking part of Cameroon, specifically from the ethnic group of the president, and they go to the English-speaking part. It dates back from those years. During the 60s and 70s, they were called Mafi. And now, one needs to give a name to them, because the fact that they cannot sympathize with the people that they are actually brutalizing is essential to mention, even though one comes from the same country, but the distinction is there. And at the same time, you cannot talk about it because, of course, you will enter into the tribal landscape, etc., etc. The fact that that even tribalism, etc., is presented as something that you have to run away from when the soldiers themselves are acting tribally is rooted in the very fabric of that continuity I am talking about. In a way of saying that the touching tales, the tales that built a reunification, actually made it possible now for the English-speaking part of Cameroon to join the conversation that was going on in the train. But not joining of a conversation is joining a conversation that has been bloody. So my own theory, my own analysis, if you want, is that if there is a social fabric that has been constituted, it is based on that continuity of violence. So what can one do? I think it is what an activist asks the first question. What can I do? What can one do? What can we do? To get there, which is the third part of what I am presenting, one will have to come back to what English-speaking Cameroonians did. And in that, the common denominator in general today is, first of all, to imagine that there was no joint engagement of English-speaking Cameroonians against all those acts of barbarism, but at the same time, one of the arguments that one has to look for ways to now build it. So what I would say is the following: it's that starting in 1985, you had, for instance, the coining of the term Ambazonia. Specifically, Gorgie Dinka in his manifesto, the new social order. So you have already an intellectual dissent that is constituted by people speaking English to claim a certain level of rights, to say it is not only wrong what is happening here, it is criminal, but it is not only a position of dissent that we are going to have, we need to have a position of constitution. We have to create something new. We have to constitute a state. We have to constitute a confederation. We have to constitute an independent country, etc., etc. So 1984, you already have that movement, and I like it very much because it underlines the fact that you have a positive movement that is coming out here. So that movement wasn't, a singular, event that came out of the blue simply by, English-speaking Cameroonians. No, amongst the French-speaking Cameroonians, also Northerners specifically, you had an attempt of a coup in 1984. On April the 6th, 1984. So with a manifesto also that said, I dare Jews. It was, they were bloodily killed, etc. But still, it is. These are two, the two major dissenting voices that one had. And I'm mentioning the Ambazonia case here, to come back to the fact that the social fabric is where dissent is being built. So it is not only a legal argument, for instance, going to the UN, for instance, going to court, or for instance, arguing in seminars. It is tapping into, I would not even say the revolutionary, simply into the natural constitution of society to awaken it to the will for it to embrace its own identity and claim the right of that identity to exist, which is self-determination, which is autonomy, which is simply, in other terms, freedom. So in my own understanding, that one is generic to the populace of Cameroon in general. But in the specific case of the English-speaking Cameroonians, you have Ambazonia that came in the language and voiced and phrased and gave a composition to what is happening. In 2 or 3 weeks, I'm going to be in London and I'm going to meet Gorgie Dinka. I never met him, but I read everything he wrote, because I think it is time for us to tap into those ideas to understand the prehistory of all of it. Why am I saying it? It is that from the position of those in power, And those are the people who started killing in 1955. And those are the people who are killing now still. The presentation even of the term Ambazonia is as if it simply was invented yesterday. It's as if it simply came out of nothingness, and as if people who phrase it compose something that is so negative that one cannot even name it. But remember, I say shrimp. Cameroon itself is simply so ridiculous that anybody of any intelligence will not name it himself or herself Cameroonian, who can call himself shrimp. So, but it is essential that we also remember that a state that has committed so many murders doesn't have any interest in having people remember their history, know their history, know where they come from. So therefore, underlining 1984 is essential as the moment where one can say Ambazonia is not something that one invented in 2017. It is something that has been running since 1984 in the mind of people who express the right of self-determination, and that self-determination is based on a legal history, on a political history, on a history of fact, etc., that is even older, on a history of populations, etc., that's even older, but yet it is something that has crystallized the mind of some thinkers in Cameroon starting in 1984. So I wanted to underline simply the historical significance of what has been done, but also the necessity of the state to always forget and to create a certain form of amnesia. I'm going to finish, to conclude, just 2 or 3 minutes on this one. I went to the University of Yaoundé. On a personal note, I went to the University of Yaoundé between 1987 and 1993. So now, at that university, it was one of the most rocky moments of my life, even because it was a moment where all my degrees are emptied of classes, because we practically were never in class. We were always on the street, battling against police, doing this, sitting at home, dead campus, etc., etc. But it was one of those moments where one is doing things without knowing the significance of what is happening. But in 1995, I think 94, you had the creation of the first Anglo-Saxon university now in Boya, 1993. So it is an important date, 1993, the first Anglo-Saxon university in Cameroon. Now, the English-speaking part of Cameroon joined the conversation in 1961. So I suspect that from 1961 to 1994, 93, you had Southern Cameroonians having GCEs every year, isn't it? It's natural. 17, 18, you have GCE. Where did they go? From 1961 to 1994. It's 33 years, 34 years. So there was nothing. Where to go? Nowhere to go. I'm mentioning it because exactly.
This is us.
Exactly.
They were setting an army, they didn't know it.
Exactly. You see what I'm talking about? There we go. You have the answer. From the point of view of the state that had that University of Yaoundé, which was the only university back then, those years I went through were rocky years, and that rocky time was pioneered by English-speaking Cameroonians who were there. I never understood why they were so angry. Let's laugh together here. I never understood. No Francophone understood. Why are they so angry? What is happening with these people? Always angry. But the thing is, when I started thinking about it later, I've traveled a lot, met everybody. I was thinking, damn, you have somebody who is skilled in maths, in physics, etc. The person will come to Yaoundé and do all his classes in French. So the person will fail. That's clear. The person is skilled in maths and will have to scale down all his or her talents to the English department. Because that's the only where you have all your class in English. That's the only place where you can pass. And during 33 years, that's what happened. Failure. And on top of it, all the Francophones who had that history of failure, of people having the GC in English and coming out to study in French, or being skilled in mathematics, computer science, and being forced to study Shakespeare. Having all that anger, but all the Francophones who are the majority will say, oh my goodness, why are English-speaking people so stupid? I mean, it is an exam I'm just passing here. Why can't they pass it? I mean, so you have the composition not only of anger, but at the same time, the state composition, I shall say, of anger, but at the same time of disrespect, of the transformation of people of intelligence into second-class citizenship, etc., etc. So that I would say, because the 90s, at the moment when I awakened to the fact that English-speaking Cameroon Institute took over the leadership in the political transformation of Cameroon, I tend to think that my generation was a testimony of it. Many people did not get it. I am trying to get it. That's what I'm trying to say. And these last years, these last months taught me so much. A way of saying thank you for what we are doing, and thank you for being here, really, for organizing to transform that right of self-determination into a new state. Thank you.
We could take note that as Southern Cameroons, we had that consciousness that reached its heights, especially in '84, when we moved from the word Southern, from the name Southern Cameroons, and we started coming with Ambazonia. Also, as he highlighted, if you are an activist, you know, in Southern Cameroons, based on our history, we had an egalitarian, progressive, and of course, a genuine way of engaging people. And the first democratic election was organized in Southern Cameroons, and people like great people like Kwame Nkrumah visited to witness the first democratic election in Africa and the installation of Ndele as the person who won that election as first prime minister. Also, there is a lot of things that he has mentioned, and you could see that if you are an activist, then you are a terrorist. If you are an activist, you have to be in jail. And as Prof mentioned, when he visited Cameroon, because of his activism, he found himself in jail. And it's because of international pressure, especially from his university and maybe being in America, that pressure was high that he has to leave. But today, he mentioned about Mancho BBC. Mancho BBC is a renowned journalist who spoke for the freedom of people, expressed ideas. But what happened, a few days ago, he was sentenced to 15 years imprisonment for just speaking, and he became a terrorist for speaking, for being an activist. People like Patrice Gangan, Penn Terence were also sentenced. You have people like Sccop, Professor Awasume, Tassan Wilfred, and a lot of them that were kidnapped in Nigeria as refugees in Nigeria. They were kidnapped in a hotel and then sent to Cameroon overnight, and today they are held incommunicado. Their family can see them. We have the mention of 74 villages being burned, and each village has an average population of 5,000 people. So just imagine how many people are deprived of their basic shelter. And beside that, all men and women were burned while in their sleep. So on that note, can I please request the House that we have a minute of silence for Sam Sawyer, who was beheaded by the Cameroon soldiers. And of course, Sam Sawyer's cousin was also beheaded. I'm also inviting a minute of silence. A few days ago, 23 unarmed civilians, young men, were murdered, were shot dead in one county, the Pinyin County of Southern Cameroons. I also wish to call for a minute of silence for the old mothers, great-grandmothers that were burned in their houses. I also want to invite a minute of silence for Comrade Akuma, who died a few days ago while on exile in Nigeria. Please, can you please join me for a minute of silence? Can you rise?
but my legal names are Edith Moma Ngang. And the reason I use Mangang, and I always start in my speeches to say I didn't go to school. Well, I want to explain that today, so hopefully this will go out so people can understand. When I say I didn't go to school, it means I've not allowed myself to be polluted and given accreditations that will disguise the understanding of what I understand education is. That's one. The reason I take the title Ma, I'm not a very old woman, I'm sure you guys know. But I choose to take the title Ma instead of doctor or PhD holder, whatever, because that is a title greater than all those and can be understood by the most of the population. Because Ma stands for mother. And if you guys want to look for a title that is befitting for a credited person, it should be Ma, because mothers give when they don't receive. Mothers get up at night when they are not paid. I say if every nation can pay $1 an hour for the work that each woman does on earth for free, all nations will be bankrupt. So I make that clear for once. If those people who hear me start by saying I didn't go to school think that it means I cannot articulate myself or I cannot read and write, they are making a mistake. Although I do explain to people that I weighed the amount of resources that I was going to use to go to pay these crooked institutions. And I weighed it as opposed to the 4 children that I raised. I decided to invest my family's resources on raising my 4 kids. So I don't apologize for that. Those people who have different priorities, go right ahead and put your money there. But that's where I stand. Now, I want to repeat the reason why they gave me this post to stand here and explain, so that when I speak off topic, you don't think that I'm doing it because I don't remember my topic. I'm doing it because if I ask to speak on the topics I'm going off topic on, they will not give me the audience because they think I've not gone to school to be able to know anything to talk about those things. So I'm seizing this position and holding you hostage to hear my own opinion about those things too. So anyway, having said that, I like to address the issue of the refugee at the end of my conversation. I want to bring a more important thing, which is the women issues. When I watched that video there, all of you saw the people who were talking on our behalf was the lawyers. What did they have on their heads? Wigs. What kind of wig?
White wigs.
White man's wig. Okay, that's the lawyers. The judges, have you seen a judge when he's seated in their throne? What does he have on his head? What type of wig? Okay. Have you seen the parliamentarian like the ones we have in Cameroon and in the British section of things? What do they have on their heads? What kind of wig? All right. So, if I understand right, the legal system and the parliamentary system, those executive systems, are all wearing a white man's wig. They are establishments established by the white man. Is it not? Our courts and everything? Yeah. Okay. So we have to understand what is happening to us. What is happening to us is that we are being, whatever has been we are living under has been influenced by Europeans. And Europeans have a history of their own. You see, they say civilization started in Africa. The mistake they did was they didn't say civilization continues in Africa. Because to be civil is to be able to come to table to negotiate without the gun or the knife or the stick. When you come and sit and I can talk and you can talk and I don't feel threatened, that is civility. It started in Africa, it remains in Africa. That's why, for the most part, Africans are having difficulties helping each other to solve the problem that is being brought from outside. Because they are independent, individual sovereign states that try not to interfere too much. Are you guys understanding? So, why I'm saying this, I want to bring something to you guys. Men of Ambazonia, what good is it that you guys free Ambazonia and then you can't live in your house peacefully? Because if justice is what brings peace, and you've solved the injustice and done to the nation, and you haven't solved the one between the relationship between you and your woman, are you going to be free? Are you really going to be free? No. You're not going to be free. So, in the middle of, sometimes when I'm talking this, people are saying that, oh man, wait until you get a country before. Which wait until you get a country? Do you know how low that momentum would have fallen for us to start, we women to start talking about our own issues? We will carry it along. That's why I'm here. Whenever I get the opportunity, I will bring it to our men. The understanding that there is no need fighting one injustice and leaving the other. Because you will come again and repeat the same thing to get rid of the other injustice. Women, and you see, when they put me to talk about refugee, I was honored. But the reason they put me to talk about refugee issues was because they think I don't have the capacity for other things. But I want to explain something to you people. We have 3 institutions in Africa that has to be cleaned up. And no matter how the black men are crying that the white man, I try to explain to you that I talk about the legal system, the judiciary system, and all that, just to show that what you guys are having here is the white man's suppression on the black man. I have a theory to say that what the white man did to the black man is what the man does to the woman. Now, when I say that, most men are upset. Why? Because they've gone and bought into the lie of the white man. When the white man enslaved the black man, he will use God to defend his enslavement. You go in the Bible, you see it there. What does a man do when he takes the woman and says he's the head and the woman is the tail? Tail of what, the fowl? How did you come about that? So my point that I'm making is this. God did not give you guys that mandate. Because there's no way, if you want to look carefully, it's a woman that has one more thing that you guys don't have. We have the apparatus to carry children. We donate 1 egg, you donate 1 from the sperm. So the point that I'm making is that these justifications that we make around and take religion to justify it is the same way the Europeans justified the injustice that a white male will do unto you black male. Until you guys can see that before we can. Until there's total justice. Now when I say that, people will say that, oh, you're trying to break families, or look at the divorce, blah, blah, blah. And I ask them the question. If I say that you should bring justice, they will say that, okay, Manga, how do you want the family to operate? I will say by merits. Merit. The biggest chefs in the world, cooks, are men. So why are the women relegated to the kitchen? Are you guys understanding what I'm saying? So in my household, and I'll use my household as an example. Okay? No, you cannot. They say you don't want to stay in Ambazonia. The point is that I'm going to make is this, in my household is by merit. After the childbirth issue, where it's only one person who can carry it, you don't have to be selfish with that, because what did you do to earn being a woman and having a womb? Nothing. It was given to you, so you can't be selfish with the utilization of it to have children. But beyond that is by merit. Are you understanding? No, you guys should listen. I'm not even laughing. You see, when I'm talking, you guys are laughing. It looks like I'm saying something. This is a comedy show. It's not. Yeah, so
It's a different perspective.
it's by merit. So if your woman can make more money out there, once she's given birth to the children, the man can change diapers. Are you understanding me, people? I'm not trying to be funny, because sometimes, like even in America, the black men are having difficulties. You can go to jail for something minute. For something they've called felony. You come out, they have 15-year probation. With that probation goes many things you cannot do. You cannot get contracts from the government. Blah blah blah. How do you want a man for 15 years? After you've paid your dues of going to jail, to come out now and you cannot compete with government jobs and all that, you become like, you're not on the same platform with a woman anymore. You'll be humiliated and all of these things. So there are these many things that are posing problems in the different families. Sometimes it is the woman, you don't need that condition for it to be, but up front, if your woman is more good at something that this world has stereotyped as a man's job, let her do it. And at the beginning, at the end of it all, your family will benefit. So this story about woman here, man here, is so in your family is by merit. After the childbearing, by merit. If you are qualified for something and it's a stereotypically woman job, go do it. Are you understanding me? Yeah. That's why I stand here today. I quickly realized that when I was having my kids, that if I don't find a way to subsidize my income, I will remain doing those stereotypical women jobs, even though I know I was equipped for other things. So I quickly created a business that feeds and pays while I go around, like the man that I never was supposed to be. So I brought 3 institutions to talk about: religion, tradition, and the legal system. Those 3 systems, our men partner with the European. If we had love for our women, and if you guys and our children, the real love where you sit on the table of men and negotiate for resources for your children and women, we will not be in this trouble. When the Europeans bring this, their madness, we will not accept it. But because you went ahead and accepted in the legal field, that's why you see lawyers coming out now and talking, because they've taken a little bit of their meat. They said they have to now start talking to French lawyers. That's why they came out. In Amazonia, these lawyers are crooks. They're the ones that kill people every day. We have experience. Those of us who are out here. So when they're talking, I'm happy that they're talking now, because they've pressed them enough. But they are part of the system. The religious people, you saw them too, they came out. They are also crooks. They are part of the system. And the traditional people, the chiefs, look at, wasn't it a chief who allowed that people be slaughtered in Pini? They are all crooks, they are all together. When you see, those whole systems have problems, we need to address it. Because until we address it, if there's not justice in the house, we will not benefit the freedom that we crave once we've gotten rid of Paul Biya and his colonial people. Now I come to the women and I'll talk about what I have seen on the ground. There's no rocket science. They are burning villages, and those people are ending up in bushes, or when they struggle hard enough, they're ending up in Nigeria. And in Nigeria, you have malnutrition. You have many young girls pregnant, having children, some are dying. Children that they've had, they actually come out, and I remember the twins that died, finally, they died. There was a situation where the mother died and then the twins died. There was a situation that the baby lives and the twins died. I couldn't bring all these things in this form, because where I live, there was no light yesterday. So I couldn't charge my stuff too, so I just forget that and I'll just speak. We need a system put in place to be able to have a bag that is full of the things that they need for delivery. When they go in Africa, there is not like here or abroad where you come already prepared and stuff. These are people who are running away from war. Besides, they were not wealthy to begin with. So in Nigeria, I found that the Air Force, they have a bag that they've put together. It has everything that a woman needs to deliver. So when their women are going, they just give them one bag. It has everything there. Those bags, I bought one to use as a sample. For them, they sell it for 10,000 nairas. But I would say 15 because that's in Lagos. Before you take it to Boki area, you have to pay transportation and handling and stuff. So I thought to myself, 15,000 nairas would be more like the amount, which is about $50 for one of those bags. Then when we take the bag, we can add to it like warnies for little babies, towels, those simple things, because they have all the other little things. And when we put that and some diapers, it could go for 3 weeks for a woman. From the time she goes into deliver, everything is in there. 3 weeks after, they can still have diapers, and of course, you put a few baby clothes in there. That's it. I am going to suggest that that's something that we can take on to deal with the issue of the pregnant girls. There are many pregnant. Think about it. What is the only other thing that a man and a woman can be doing? After you've gone to the farm and come back, you're sitting around. There's nothing else to do. If there's no money to buy Nimbo, what is the next thing that is free? Are you guys understanding? So no matter what we are doing, so I'm talking, you guys are hearing me. So whether we like it or not, there are people getting pregnant even right now. So we need to get to doing some of these things and getting them ready. One of the things that I noticed was that there was a period of time they even chased down the relief workers. They had to run and come and hide before we negotiated to get them, not to be chasing our people. During that time, we were even afraid, those of us were afraid to go to present ourselves. So there was a need that we put together a non-profit, even down there, that will combine with Nigerians, that will handle the issue of distributing our stuff when we are being exposed, you understand? So there are those things that we've been able to try we are working on getting that one done so that our people can come here. But honestly, the issues of feeding, malnutrition, sick, malaria, typhoid, I mean just endless things. There are old people, old women struggling. It's just a catastrophe. I heard that the UN has put something together, but you and I know that if up till now the UN was not doing that much, it was us who were sustaining our own people. They will come once a while. There was no routine as to how they come and go. They make limited resources, and when it is finished, the bills are stuck. Doctors will say, if you don't pay, we are not going to. So all these things are problems that we're having on the ground. Feeding is a problem. Hunger. I went to one camp. When I got there, about 22 people were sick. I had to take them personally with my own money to go buy food for them to eat. Even when they were going to deal with them, medicine they could not take because they were hungry. So you have to address the issue of hunger first before you go and address the issue of, and that particular clinic, these women had gone with children, they turned them away. And when I asked, they said that they had to fill a form, I don't know, it's UNHCR form. They have another company, organization that deals with it. And they said the forms were finished. That's why they were not taking care of the people, because the forms were finished. So I asked the question, so somebody will come here with an emergency, you'll be turning them away because forms are finished. So I had to insist, and out of insisting, they brought up the issue that even if they were to attend to them, some of these people haven't eaten. So how are we going to give them medicine? So I had to go now and buy cabin biscuits, brought them for the children to eat with water and before they could take medication. So the problems are real. Some of us are on the ground. I've been in Nigeria since the 4th conclave. I've not gone back to America.
November last year.
Yes. So I've been there all this time. Even when things were rough, I just lay low. and then I will come out and I have Nigerian friends, have my ways to do my own things. I'm not going to stand on camera and be exposing my own stuff. But the bottom line is that some of us have system in place and people who are locals that we can work through to still get things done. But we have our non-profit organization here that we've put together, and hopefully we can connect with you people and see what there is to help some of us down there to be more efficient. We've brought in vehicles that can carry things. I have a big truck that I imported that can transfer things, you know. It's just we're doing it slowly. It's not an organization doing it. You are at the mercy of when people are going to volunteer and give you help. I don't want to take any more time. I hope I did not abuse you guys too much by talking off topic, but that's all I have to say.
In that regard, we'll move to the next phase, which is engagement with previous speakers, so that we can now either ask questions or make comments. I'll leave the floor to everybody that wants to engage. Thank you.